So here we are, .NET MAUI Blazor. Forget all the stuff about .NET MAUI. You don't need that. You want to use .NET MAUI Blazor. That's where it's at. My name, I also got an awesome introduction. So my name is Gerald. I indeed work at the .NET MAUI team, so don't take that too seriously. You should also use .NET MAUI. You can find me on Twitter. There's my email as well. If you have any questions afterwards, I'm happy to deal with that. But please, I like my questions to be in the public because a lot of people want to ask me questions. And, you know, if it's in the public, then other people can come in. Other people smarter than me maybe have answers as well. So, you know, if you send me an email, it will come onto a big pile of other emails. And you will be stuck waiting for me. And that's something that no one really enjoys. So if you want to ask, do it on Twitter. If it's really something that you want to do more privately, send me an email. Like a couple of people already mentioned, I also do a little bit of a thing on YouTube where I talk about this stuff as well. In a little bit more bite-sized videos. So if that's something that you're interested in, please check out the YouTube link and subscribe to all my videos. So on the agenda for today, I think it's straightforward. And actually, Mark has already done some of the work for me. So that is very nice of him. Thank you so much. Because it's like .NET MAUI Blazor. So the first kind of like obvious question is, what is .NET MAUI? Well, we kind of established that. I'm going to go over to a couple of other things in case you kind of like missed what Mark has been saying. Or maybe I explain it just a little bit differently, and then you will understand it if you didn't really understand it. But Mark did a great job. So let's give Mark a round of applause. We didn't really do that, right? So let's do that. He did a great job. So, but I'm just going to go over that really, really quickly. Then, of course, what is Blazor? So we have these two components. What is .NET MAUI? What is Blazor? And then the final one, who guessed it? Who can guess it? All right. What's .NET MAUI Blazor? We just put them together, and we're going to look what .NET MAUI Blazor is. So Mark already said this. Like I said, he did an amazing job. It's the evolution of Xamarin Forms. And he actually kind of confirmed the theory that I had here, because I always start this talk with like, Xamarin Forms has been our cross-platform app offering for C#, .NET, for iOS, Android, UWP. We also had kind of like a couple of really unofficial supported platforms who were supported by the community, Tizen, Linux, WPF, macOS. And then I start with a little joke like, oh yeah, you know, I don't really know if the story is true, but I like to believe it is, because if you look at like this graphic from the website from way back when, like which Xamarin approach is best for you, Xamarin Forms is best for, and you don't even have to look at like what's listed there under the bullets. You could just look at the screenshot, right? For Xamarin Forms, it has a couple of boring boxes, some entries, a button, and also the name, Xamarin Forms. Who came up with that? It's so boring. So, and then the bottom one is Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, and suddenly you can do media players, you can do games, you can do maps. So you know, for Xamarin Forms, it seems that it was, well, if it was intended for prototyping, I didn't want to go that far. Maybe it is. I don't know. I should chat with Mark and see if that's actually the theory that we're working with here. But my kind of theory was like, you know, it was designed for data entry applications, for not really rich applications doing all the things with the maps and etc. But a couple of entries, a button to do kind of like your data entry stuff. That's what it may be intended for, and also that's why the way it was kind of architected way back when, right? But like Mark also said, like, you know, people started to doing other things with that. People started to demand other things from it, to do more, and you could do more. But kind of like the architecture wasn't prepared for that. So together with that, the performance kind of like degraded, right? It was really pushing it to the edges, which is amazing that this product could do that, but it never really was intended to do all this. So it's good that we now have the chance to go over to .NET MAUI, which stands for .NET Multi-Platform App UI, and we made the P kind of lowercase conveniently because .NET MAUI just doesn't have the nice same ring to it. So .NET MAUI it is, and with that we have like the unique opportunity to redo all the things, because also with Xamarin Forms we wanted to stay backwards compatible until forever, eternity. I think if you start like a Xamarin Forms application at 2.5, we're at 5 now, 2.5, and you keep upgrading it, it should still kind of like work. I think I heard someone who actually did something like that, and it mostly still worked. So that is, really amazing, really admirable, but it's also not great because that really prevents us to take the next step. And with .NET MAUI, it's kind of like exact same, but not really. Now it's our cross-platform apps offering for the iOS, Android, Windows, so UWP is gone, and macOS. So macOS kind of like moved to the bigger line. macOS is a first-class citizen now, and so you can see the desktop targets now are our first-class citizens, our first targets as well. So iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS, you can all do that from .NET MAUI. And if we go do a little marketing sauce over that, then in one line you could say .NET MAUI is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any device that run on Android, iOS, macOS, or Windows from a single code base. So I think Mark kind of like did the high overview. So if we take that a little bit deeper in a more kind of like technical sense right here, let's see what we're going to see here. So this is what you want to do, right? We want to have that app code because that is your code that you want to focus on. That's your $1 million, your $1 billion idea. That's your business logic. That's the stuff that you want to write. And you want to run that on all these devices. But to get from all the app code onto those devices, there is a lot of layers in between, which also make like the whole development very complex. And that is kind of like our jobs now as the .NET MAUI team to take all of that away and make it easier for you. But just to understand what's all underneath, it can be good to see all this. So it starts with all the SDKs that are put out there. So by Google, it's Android, the Android SDKs. From Apple, it's iOS, macOS, and Windows. Well, that's us as well, right? So that makes it easy. But those are all in like Java, Kotlin, Objective-C, Swift, all those kinds of things. So, that's not great if you want to do it for all these devices. You have to build each app over and over again. So how do we get from there to where we are now? Well, first we need to .NET runtime. That's like where all your .NET code is being run through, right? And if you know a little bit about the history, then for Android, iOS, and macOS, it still uses Mono, which is kind of like an open source implementation of the whole .NET framework. And that is still used to run on all the other platforms, and on Windows, it goes through Core CLR. But that's not really that important because as of .NET 6, we now have a .NET base class library, a BCL, that is used for all of those. So everything goes through that BCL, that is run on the .NET runtime, and that will figure out like where does it need to run through Mono, through Core CLR, doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about that. So we have this single BCL now, which is great. Then on top of that, we have .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, Mac Catalyst, and WinUI. And .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, you might know them by the name of Xamarin.Android and Xamarin.iOS. That's like the old names. But for the rest, you can still write the apps that are now known as like the traditional Xamarin apps, where you would still write apps with C# and .NET, but not with like the abstraction layer for the UI. And you would write still all the Android namespaces and iOS namespaces and iOS types and that kind of stuff. But now with C# code, and you can still do that. It's kind of like only the name changed from Xamarin to .NET for iOS and whatever. All the namespaces were platform specific anyway, so you can still do that. You don't really need to do anything for that. You just upgrade to .NET 6 and boom, it will work automatically. But what we did for that in the beginning is made bindings for every API on the platform, on the SDKs down at the bottom. We made a C# equivalent, and that kind of like makes the bindings between those two. And that makes it possible to write all the code for those platforms through C# and .NET. And for WinUI, again, that's already C# and .NET, so that's great. Then on top of that, we are creating now .NET Multi-Platform App UI. And that's the abstraction layer where you don't have to worry about any of the underlying stuff. And you can just learn to work with .NET MAUI, and you can focus on only your app code. You need to know how to work with .NET MAUI, and you can deploy to all the devices down here. And who knows where you can bring it somewhere in the future. Now, I'm going to quickly go over this. I think Mark already did some of this as well. Like if you know the whole history about Xamarin Forms and whatnot, we already have a lot of controls implemented. We have all this stuff for navigation. So it's not just the UI that is just getting started, right? Like with WinUI, you can see that, which is also kind of a fun challenge because we're building on top of that. They still have to implement some things. And whenever they do, I mean, they were the underlying layer, right? So only whenever they do, we can build on top of that, right? So, but because of the whole history, because there was already a lot from Xamarin Forms, we already have this rich library of controls and all the things. Adaptive layouts is now more important than ever because you can run on desktop and mobile with the different form factors. So a lot of effort went in that. And we have renewed attention for like right to left, sorry, or left to right, whatever you want. And semantic accessibility, because accessibility, you know, that's also something very important to us. And if we make it easier to work with accessibility for you, then we get more accessible apps and everyone wins, right? So that's pretty amazing. Again, I'm not, you know, this talk exists usually not right after a talk that introduces .NET MAUI. So there's a little bit of overlap here. So I'm just going to go over this really quick. This is also something that Mark already mentioned, like we now have this single project. So if you know how to work with Xamarin Forms, this should look pretty familiar. You have this shared project on the top where you want to write all your code. That's where whatever code you write there will be shared across the platforms. And then you have the targets for Android, iOS. And if you have Windows targets and Tizen or whatever, you would have multiple projects even. And for all of those projects, you have to repeat like the resources, the images, and then in the images, you need to resize them to all kinds of resolutions and things for all the skills and whatnot. It's a total mess. Also fonts, you need to duplicate those, the splash screens, well, all the things that are on the slide basically. So what we have now, which is not so much a .NET MAUI feature, but you know, it's kind of developed especially for us. So it's still a .NET MAUI feature somehow. Is that we now smash that together and we have this single project which uses multi-targeting. So we now have this platforms folder with Android, iOS, Windows, Mac Catalyst is also in there. And you can write your platform-specific code if that's still what you need. You can totally do that. But everything outside of that is like the shared code. And also this means that you can now share all those resources. So the fonts, the images, you can just put them inside of your project, your single project, and we will do all the resizing and whatnot. So you probably best use SVGs as well because they scale to infinity and beyond. So you can just, we are just going to resize all the images to all the sizes that are needed for your app icon, your splash screen, the images inside of your app. So that just works great. But Gerald, how is it going to know how to run which target? How do I know? How does it know when to run for Android, for Google, for iOS, for whatnot? Well, in this run menu, which might seem a little bit weird, I think if you're like more the traditional .NET developer, you would just have, you know, the configurations here, right? But now you will also have like the different platforms here. So you will now find here the iPhone. It's a bit weird if you see David's iPhone if you're not called David, but you know, maybe it's called a little bit different in your run menu. But you will see the iPhone there. You will see your Pixel phone there. You will see your Windows machine there. And depending on which one you choose, it will know like, hey, I need these bits of code. I will put that together and boom, we're now running on iOS. So that is how it basically knows and doing all the great stuff. Leonard, enter the waiting room. Let's let him come in. So, okay, what do we have more? Well, essentials, I can hold that part because that's what Mark already mentioned. Those are basically all the APIs for all the devices and the sensors and even more for all the platforms that we're supporting as well. Essentials as a name is now kind of like what we refer it to, but at some point during the previews, we kind of like divided them up into more logical namespaces. So now it's just APIs inside of .NET and .NET MAUI for you to use on all these devices instead of essentials. If you don't really know the history about this, then the essentials name doesn't really make sense. So we decided to get rid of it. And then, of course, we have Blazor Hybrid. That's the thing that we're going to talk about. But this is a little teaser. We'll talk about that later. I have a little demo. I don't really know if that makes sense because it will just be a file new .NET MAUI application. Well, let me just quickly do it to refresh your memory, right? Thank you, Gerald. I was busy listening to you. Yeah, I get that a lot. I get that a lot. I'm very distracting. So boom, I'm on my Mac here, but now with the flick of a mouse button, I can just transport to Windows land, basically just like Mark did as well. And I'm now typing my password in a clear box, and I hope that wasn't shared. All right, there we are. So this was for a next demo. Spoiler alert. So let me just quickly whip open a new Visual Studio 2022, and then we create a new project. And here, Mark already also showed you, we have a couple of templates here. So let's just get the Maui one. The Maui Blazor, we'll get to that. I'm just going to do a regular Blazor one for now. Maui App 4 seems like a fantastic name for an app. Let's do that. Click create, and we should see that. And basically what we're going to see is a little upgraded version from the project structure that we just saw in the screenshots. Because now we have the app shell. So if you know about Xamarin Forms shell, which kind of like is an opinionated way to do your navigation and do a couple of things, that is now the default, because that will just give you a couple of these things for free. For beginning developers, that is probably easier to get started with. And that's kind of the thing, right? Like if I'm talking about this a lot, and I am talking about a lot, I talk a lot in general. But this was kind of like a realization I had at some point, because I don't know who you are, because we didn't really do a show of hands who knows Xamarin Forms, but I know a lot about Xamarin Forms. And I looked at everything from that perspective, right? Like, hey, this is Xamarin, this is the new thing for Xamarin Forms. And we need to be kind of like on par, and else people will be disappointed. And the people coming from Xamarin Forms might be disappointed, because we will at most have the exact same things as in Xamarin Forms, plus a couple of new things, right? But there's also this whole new group who is going to see .NET MAUI as not the evolution of Xamarin Forms, but as the new UI framework from Microsoft that coincidentally, also is cross-platform. And that's a pretty cool new perspective that a lot of new people are coming in, seeing this for the first time and think like, wow, you can do all of this stuff and now cross-platform, which is really amazing. That's a nice way to look at it as well. I don't even know why I told this, but oh yeah, so the app shell. That's like kind of like, so for a lot of people, they are going to get started. And although we're trying to make it as easy as possible, there's still a lot of stuff to take in if you're going to do cross-platform development. So basically what our goal is, this is my very personal goal, is to kind of like lower that threshold as much as possible. With things like in the Maui program, you have that generic host builder that very much looks like how you do it on ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, all of that stuff. If you are a .NET developer coming from somewhere else in the ecosystem, you look at this and you kind of like understand what's going on here, right? The same with App Shell. We're just trying to give you some things that will make it easier to get started with your app. It's a perfectly good thing to use. So definitely go check that out. But that's why it kind of like became the default here. All the rest, like I said, we have the platforms here because at the end of the day, we still need all that metadata for Android, the Android manifest, the info plist for iOS, because, Apple and Google, they're very nice folks, but they're not going to say like, hey, send over an exe and we'll figure out how to run that on iOS. They're not going to do that. So at the end of the day, we still need to have an AAB and an IPA binaries that run on those platforms. So we still need this platform specific stuff. But generally, our kind of mission is to let you touch that as little as possible, and to abstract all of that away, basically. But whenever you do something in this platform specific, you can see, like I just mentioned, this basically takes you like .NET for Android world, and you can suddenly see all these kinds of Android namespaces right here, and activities, which is a Android thing. So here you can start writing your Android code. And if we do the same for iOS, then we see kind of like the opposite. Now we're in iOS land, and we see using Foundation and a bunch of red squigglies, which brings me to the next pro tip. It's kind of like a not really discoverable, but new in Visual Studio is here, this little combo box here at the top, where it now says Android, and that's exactly the reason for all the red squigglies here. I think the tooling kind of needs to catch up, or maybe, it's also hard to kind of like know what target you want to look at. Visual Studio still can't read minds, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But you can here now see all the targets that you have in your project. So if we switch this to iOS, Visual Studio knows like, okay, you want to look at this from the iOS perspective, and now suddenly I understand all the types here. And if I now go back to the activity, now you will see all the red squigglies here because, you know, all this stuff doesn't exist in iOS. So that's kind of like, if you see this, it will still build, it will still run, but it kind of like looks weird, right? So that now you know how to get rid of that. And I mean, it's never been easier to get rid of red squigglies, right? You just boom, check this, and boom, it works. So okay, I just wanted to talk mostly about the project structure here, and you'll see in a little bit why. So I'm not even gonna run this. I'm gonna keep this instance open, and we'll see why I showed you this in a little bit. All right. So what is Blazor? That was next on the agenda, right? Well, web development without JavaScript. That is kind of like what it is. Boom, I'm flying through the time here. I just, you know, this is all you need to know. I can go, hey, I can go home. Wait, I'm already home. All right, so if you think about single page applications, which, you know, look great, work great in browsers with like the flyout menus and grids and all the rich things that you know from modern day web technology, and you go to the same application on your mobile device, it scales, it's responsive, it's super nice. But if you think of all of these things and you want to also run that with ASP.NET today, you totally can, but you will always be faced with like Angular and React and Vue, and they are all written in JavaScript. Now, I can make all kinds of jokes on JavaScript. In fact, I can do that all day. But you know, if it's JavaScript or some other language, it doesn't really matter. Like if it's a language that you like or you don't like. Whenever you need to switch the context between different languages, it's just not great. It makes you less productive. And thus, at some point, we decided like, hey, we're now going to create Blazor. And that's on top of .NET. You can use C#. You can do all these web things. It runs on the client. It can do all the things that JavaScript can do. And now you don't have to leave the C# language. You don't have to leave the tooling or Visual Studio IDE. It's a consistent ecosystem, and you know it's stable. It has been. What did we celebrate? 20 years, 25 years of .NET. So you know we've been around for a long time. You know what you can expect. So you can leverage all these things, all these existing skills, and now still build all the single page applications and the web applications. And that is really cool. Where does it all fit in? Like I already said, it's built on top of ASP.NET. So we already have MVC, Razor Pages, single page applications. You can totally do that with all the JavaScript things. On the other side, we have like the backend services, HTTP, REST API, SignalR, which is also a big thing in Blazor, by the way, all kinds of other things. And Blazor fits right in there with all the web UI stuff because, you know, it's very much a UI facing thing. So how does it work? Until now, until I get to the next part. So this is your reality for now. And you're going to be really amazed with that third option. You won't expect it. Is we have Blazor Server. And Blazor Server kind of like is the more traditional approach, if you will, because you're still going to reach out to a server and it's going to send like, hey, Mark clicked on this button, and then it's going to generate the changes for like your UI in the browser. It's going to send that back to your browser, and then it's going to render the changes there. So you still need a browser. And it goes through a SignalR connection, right? So I said it's going to be big on SignalR. So basically that is still a really cool thing. It kind of works and looks the same as exactly as the other option that I'm about to show you. But this really still uses a client server approach. What is really important is the Razor components. You'll see that coming back a couple of times, and you'll hear me mention that a couple of times, and you'll see near the end why that is. And the other approach is Blazor WebAssembly. And with Blazor WebAssembly, you also get that whole Blazor stack inside of the browser. And you suddenly see that it runs on WebAssembly. Now, WebAssembly is not something that we at Microsoft have invented. That is some other technology. And basically what you can do is you can write your compiler to compile to WebAssembly. And suddenly, you know, you can run all these things in the browser. And it's not even just C# or the things that you see here, C# and .NET. You can also do it for Rust or C++, or if you have some language that you invented yourself and you're going to write a compiler that compiles it to WebAssembly, then you can run that in the browser as well. But this is more like your JavaScript approach, where you have .NET, where you have C# inside of the browser. It can update the DOM, the document object model. directly. And also here you can see those Razor components. So this is kind of like the two flavors that we have today with Blazor, how you can use it. Now, whenever you have options, you have pros and cons. So I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I think the kind of like the important ones are the cons that you see near the bottom. So for the Blazor server, you will always have to have a connection, right? You will always have to be online. So, if you want to have an application that runs offline, then this is not the option for you. Also, there is a little bit of a higher UI latency because every change in the UI, every click that you do has to go to the server, has to go back with the changes. It's only doing like the diffs, but still it has to go back and forth. So there's always a little bit of latency. For WebAssembly, there is a larger download size because if you want to run .NET, we just got rid of the .NET framework where you had on the machine to actually learn. We're not about to bring that back. So you have to provide the .NET runtime that to one. So, you can download all of .NET that you can use with Blazor in 1 megabyte, which is, just a good image. GIF. And do over the line. Maybe other countries aren't as blessed with like unlimited data plans and whatnot. You want to be mindful of that, then that's something to keep in mind. And a little bit of slower runtime performance, well, because this all runs on the client, so it's very much dependent on how fast your client machine is, right? So that's something that you suddenly don't really have control over anymore. So like I already said, we now have not just the server and WebAssembly, but we also have the hybrid approach. So that's something that I'm going to talk in the next section. But first, let's hop into a little other demo, which is basically showing you what a typical Blazor application looks like for the people who don't know that. So let's bring back Visual Studio 2022 right now and close this solution. And what I'm going to do, maybe I still have one. Do I have one? Blazor app 5. That sounds like a great candidate. So I think this is just a file new Blazor application where you can see a couple of interesting things. So everything runs on Razor pages, right? Let me just close all of this for the spoiler effect. And you can see we have a couple of Razor pages. It all starts with the program CS, of course. This also brings in like the minimal, this is not really minimal API, but this brings all the file scoped namespaces and all that kind of stuff. So you don't really see a namespace even in here. It's all just slammed to the left of the screen. I still have to get used to it. But you can see that, again, here's the host builder, right? So this follows kind of like the same pattern that we just saw for our .NET MAUI app, which is really cool. So boom, I know how this works. That's really cool. And from there, we go to kind of like this app.razor. And this app.razor is a special file with a router. And it's like XML formatted. And it gives us a couple of things. It scans these assemblies for the roots, like, you're going to register your pages. So if we go here to a page and we're going to go to the index, we have this little add page slash. So slash is the index, that's going to be the home. And we have this fetch data, which is going to be slash fetch data. And with this app razor, it's going to scan the assembly, which is, this app.assembly. You can register additional ones if you want to put your pages in another assembly. And it's going to scan for all the pages and things to get those roots out. Now, whenever it's found, it's going to do a little listing, and whenever it's not found, so basically your 404 scenario, is going to show you a little, well, you can do this inline HTML right here. You can provide it with another page if that's what you want, but you can do a couple of these things here. That's kind of like how it bootstraps your Blazor application. Now, like I already said, we have this little index, so that's at the slash. And if we kind of like go line by line here, you can see this. If you know a little bit about HTML, then you probably know that page title is not a HTML thing. It's not HTML5. It's not Web3. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. This is very much a Razor Blazor thing, because we suddenly don't have all kinds of JavaScript things, right? We want to stay inside of .NET and stay inside of C#. And usually you would kind of like also go out to your HTML page and maybe update the title inside of your layout or whatnot. And this is kind of like a helper in ASP.NET now to set that page title. I'm not even sure if this is something that's very Blazor specific, but just so you know what's going on here. H1, hello world, that's definitely HTML. Welcome to your app. This is just plain text that's going to be outputted as HTML as well. And then you see this survey prompt. You know, you can also recognize like this Blazor, Razor specific stuff because of the syntax highlighting, right? Is it actually visible to everyone? Let me zoom it in maybe a little bit more. So you can see this has a little bit of a different color than the regular HTML tags, right? And this survey prompt also. And this survey prompt, if we go to our shared folder here and we go to our survey prompt, you can see that this is also Razor and also Blazor. And this is actually a Blazor component, a reusable component. Now, right here now, it's in the same project, but you can take this out. You can put it in a separate DLL. You can take that DLL, put that in a NuGet, and you can send it to everyone. And suddenly everyone can implement surveys on their projects, which is not very useful because it comes in the template, but you could if you wanted to. So, but this makes it very powerful because again, we have these components, and again, I'm going to show you later on why that's so important. Actually, this is a bit big. I hope you can still see this because it gets a little confusing else. So you can see this is just another mix of HTML. And here we have this add notation again, add title. And this is kind of like, it might remind you of the old ASP Classic or PHP even, where you can like inline all of your code, because whenever you do this add notation, you can start writing C# behind that. And in this case, it's add title because we could specify, this title here, right? And that's really handy for the components because what you can do is you can set this property and you can get the parameter attribute on here. And then it will know that, hey, we can set this title from the outside. That makes it really easy for these components to use because now you can suddenly use them as these attributes right here on your component. And it will then automatically pick up that parameter, put that title here at the survey prompt, and suddenly we will see that working. It's giving me red squigglies now because in a previous demo, let me see if I can quickly fix that. What you can also do is take this. Actually, we don't need this. Is take this property and comment all this out. And you can write here this with an add code block, and you can do it all inline here. This does the exact same thing, but what you can also do is say, this is actually the default that comes out of the template, but I personally prefer to have my code in like the code behind. So if you create a new file that is exactly the same name, surveyprompt.razor, but then add .cs, it will function as the code behind, and you can copy the code there. You will have to create a public partial class survey prompt, and you can put all the code in there and it will just work all the same. Or you can do it like this as well. So that's kind of like how this works. Also, like if you're wondering like where the name for the survey component, where that comes from, that's inferred from like your file name. So if you call it surveyprompt.razor, this name has to be the survey prompt. Now, if we quickly run this, if we have a look at how this looks like in the browser, we will actually see a typical single page application in the web, which will have a little menu. It has Bootstrap on board by default, so it's nice and responsive. Everything looks great. So you can see if I collapse it, we get a little flyout menu here. If I make it bigger again, it comes back. And you can see kind of like these things are rendered like pretty quickly, right? It just looks and feels like every single page application out there. The counter just works, click me. Fetch data kind of simulates getting data from a third-party service, parses a little bit of JSON and does all that kind of stuff. Actually, the counter is very interesting. That really shows that we're not doing any JavaScript stuff here. So you can just see we have this button, right? We can also mix the things. We have this button, which is HTML, and then suddenly we have that add notation with the on-click again. And now we can refer to a C# method. So here we have this private void increment count, which increments this little variable here, and you can see we don't do anything else, so it automatically picks up that, hey, this variable has changed a value, and we're going to show that in the UI. So that's something that's really nice. There are definitely going to be scenarios where that isn't the case, and then you have, I think, state has changed that you can call manually, and then it will also update the UI for you. That's like more the advanced things, but for kind of like the standard scenarios like this, it will all work very nicely. All right, I think that's all I had to say about this. So let's jump back. And here you can see kind of like it spun up a little web service, of course, to actually show me this thing, right? Why I mentioned that, we'll get to that in a little bit too. Cliffhanger. I see a couple of things in the chat. Is Mark dissing me back? File scope namespaces are quite awesome. Yes, thank you. I think we lost you for a moment. No, I'm still here. I'm still here. Maybe I'm talking to no one. Really dig it. Get a Copilot. Yeah, that's cool too. Should I just do a demo of that? No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. What next? Demo. Maui. So now the last thing. .NET MAUI plus Blazor. The best of both worlds, I would say. And I did this animation in PowerPoint, which is really a lot of work, so I have to show it. Here's the .NET bot coming with all kinds of mobile devices. So with .NET MAUI Blazor, you can build cross-platform native apps that run on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android, which is not entirely coincidentally all the exact platforms that you can run on with .NET MAUI. You can use your existing Razor class library. So that is those reusable Razor components that I just mentioned. You can reuse your existing ones. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to recompile. You don't have to do anything. Also, third-party controls that you might have, they are out there for Blazor already. You don't need to do anything. You can just take them, plug them into your application, and it will just work. That's really amazing. And you have full platform device access, which is very important. I will get to that in a little bit as well. So what exactly is Blazor Hybrid? Blazor Hybrid is an extension of Blazor. It's basically the third option that goes with Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly, as we've just seen. It's built on top of .NET 6 and .NET MAUI, but the really interesting thing is it's not only implemented for .NET MAUI, it's also implemented for WPF. It's also implemented for, yes, it's still a thing. It's also implemented for WinForms. So you can use it with all these things, and that really enables a lot of new scenarios that are out there right now. We implemented through a Blazor Web View control to host and render Blazor Web UI. And that's kind of like the important thing. The only thing that is still web about Blazor whenever you run it in these scenarios is the UI. All the other stuff, we can skip WebAssembly. We're already running on the .NET runtime directly. We don't need WebAssembly. We don't need to spin up a kind of like web server inside of our mobile application. We don't need to do all that. We are running all the .NET code straight on the .NET runtime on all the things that we've just seen in that little architecture picture. The only thing kind of like web still about it is the UI. Now, how does it all work? So we have this in XAML. I think I forgot to show you that in like the .NET MAUI application, but I'm sure Mark did. We have all this XAML stuff. You can also do it in C# if that's what you want. And we have this Blazor web view, right? So that's in our main page.xaml. That's like our initial page. And there we have this little host page because we need to bridge that to the web, right? So we have the www with the index.html. And inside of that, we have like inside of that root component thing, you can see the selector. I will show you that in code in a little bit. And we just have a app selector, which is an HTML element. And inside of that div, we're going to load our whole Blazor application. And then the component type, there we point to that main .razor in this case. And that's where we find the whole router thing again, right? So that bootstraps our whole Blazor application. That shows us where the routes are for the pages. And that's going to actually show us the things that we want to see. Now, this scenario kind of like shows you a full hybrid app, so full screen basically, where everything is going to be Blazor. But you know, we implemented it as a Blazor web view. You can see it here in the image as well. You can also totally use this somewhere inside of your UI. So you can also make only this little square a Blazor web view and load a Blazor thing in there. So that's totally something that you can do as well. So you know, you kind of like have two approaches where you make the full UI Blazor and you do everything with HTML and CSS if that's what you like, or you turn it around and you implement the kind of like regular native tab view, and each of the tabs has a specific Blazor web view that only loads a couple of, well, maybe the one tab loads an actual native view in your app, and the other tab loads the Blazor web view with some Blazor things, because you still want to transform it into something native, or maybe it's not going to happen. Whatever your scenario requires, you can definitely do that with this. So then also some mythbusters. So Blazor hybrid apps run 100% natively in one process. That's basically what I just said. Like, we don't spin up any web services inside of your app. We don't need to do anything. So there's no HTTP request, no network required, and no browser sandbox. If you, of course, if you want to get data from some kind of third-party service, excuse me, then there's definitely going to be HTTP requests, and there's network required. But if you don't do that, you can totally build a offline application with Blazor Hybrid. And the more important thing is no browser sandbox. So normally, if you run inside of a browser, then thank goodness there is a sandbox, because you don't want to go to the wrong website and suddenly, boom, your hard drive is formatted, or maybe even something worse. But we can totally format your hard drive with .NET MAUI Hybrid, which is, formatting the hard drive is maybe not the greatest thing, but there's definitely scenarios there where you want to do more than what is possible in the web with your application, right? Because this is a desktop application. It should behave like one, or a mobile application. So you can do all the things that you can do with a native application as well. And like I already said, the only thing kind of like HTML and web about this is still the UI that is rendered in a web view control. All the rest is, native .NET. So that's really nice. All right, so let's see a demo of that, the main event. I got a little thing right here. So I have two young children, two boys who are, just getting into Lego. I'm not a big Lego fan myself, weirdly enough, because, it usually goes hand in hand. IT, Lego fans, it happens. Me, not so much. But, and now a whole world opened up to me. There's like, I think it's called the Brick Tracker website, where you can track all the sets and how many colors there are in there, how many bricks there are in there, how heavy it is, how it smells. I don't know. They recall all kind of details. I even found a website where you can like order bricks, like one brick costs a couple of cents. I don't know. So there's a whole world opening up to me. And we're also trying to remodel our house a little bit. So we have to kind of like move our Lego. So I decided to write a little application who can load CSV files from the Brick Tracker website. We'll calculate how big the whole set is, how many boxes you need to move it, and well, that's what I wrote a little thing for. So let's first check out like this Brick Tracker MAUI client, and we have this is very interesting. So this is if you would go to File New, I hope this doesn't close my thing straight away. If I would go to File New, you also have like the .NET MAUI Blazor app, right? And that's like another template, which has that main page.xaml that we've just seen. So that's this one, the Blazor web view, and that ties it all together, and that brings you to like the main.razor, which has that router. So we just all saw that, right? But kind of like the interesting thing, if you look at like the whole template here, I don't present a lot on Windows, so I'm not sure if this zooming is going to work. Oh, there we go. Then kind of like the interesting thing here is if you look at this template, so this is the .NET MAUI Blazor template. You will see that it has like kind of the two templates, but then smashed together, and boom, now we have .NET MAUI Blazor. So we can still see like the platforms folder here with the Android, iOS, macOS. You can still do all these kinds of things. But we also have the pages with all the Razor pages. And I think we even got the data with the weather forecast, which was, if you look closely, like the thing that we got in the Blazor template, the data that it was loading. And a www route with some CSS and HTML in that. And the favicon, I still don't know how to pronounce that, favicon. So you have that. That's very important. So they just took these two templates, and now we have all of this. How am I going to escape here? Okay. So we have all of that, and what is kind of like the interesting thing is if we look at like the index.razor. So kind of like the only thing we still have of .NET MAUI is like the XAML page, right? And here we can just do all of our Razor things, including the exact same syntax, all of the exact same things that we've just seen in a Blazor application. Now, there's a couple of things here that I'm going to go over in just a little bit, but here is the really important thing. This is the collection summary. Now, again, if you look closely, this is a Blazor component, right? The collection summary. And if we look here, we have this brick summary. So this is an actual separate project, which is a Blazor class library, which has a couple of things. It has some Blazor pages. So it has this collection summary, as you can see here. So this is something that we can just plug into this MAUI client, and we can just use it here. And again, if we look at this, probably then we should see, is this in the code behind? I'm not sure. Oh, we have this parameter, right? So public brick collection set sets, and that makes it possible to kind of like set this set in here, which is even a complex object, right? So we have this brick set collection, which is a complex object of things. We can just put that in here with this attribute, and it will just work all the same. Now, let me actually run this and show you what this does. So here you can already see like we have a couple of like variations, right? If show file picker, then we're going to show this button, and else it's not going to do that. So that's what makes the Blazor reusable component so important, in my opinion, is you still want to make like kind of differences depending on the platform that you're running on. Now we're going to see a mobile app. I'm going to run this on Android. Whenever this wakes up for Android, it can take a little while. But if you want to run this on the web, like we're bound to that sandbox again, right? I also have a web target for this, which we'll see in a little bit. And then you can't just, go out to the file system and get those files, right? You really have to push that upload thingy. The user has to select the file, and only then you will have access to that file. So that's like kind of the differences that you have between the platforms. Still, this is maybe not the best example, but there's other examples that you can definitely, like the camera maybe. For a device, you can go straight to the camera because you have all the things, and also for the web browser you would have to go through all these hoops to actually get the permissions for that. So I think you can still definitely define these different paths. So I think it's unlikely that you would have like your entire Blazor project, you're now going to take that and put that in a .NET MAUI project. I think it's much more likely that you will have all these components that are reusable, and you're now going to reuse those between both your web application and your kind of like mobile application. So while I was talking, I talked long enough for the app to come up, and you will see kind of like the exact same Blazor template that's here, but now with a fancy, nice logo. And we see this open a file thing, right? So let's click that. And although it might not really show, this is also a very powerful feature that you see here, because we're now going through the Xamarin Essentials, or what was previously Xamarin Essentials, and we're opening the file picker on the device. So we are no longer in that browser sandbox, but more importantly, we can just reach into the platform and use those features. If I wanted to use the camera, I can. If I wanted to use the GPS, I totally can. If I want to, I don't know, what are other things that you want to do on a mobile device? You can do all the things that you can do with a real native app. You will just have to, well, you don't even really have to make that bridge. Essentials does a lot of that. You can actually see here Microsoft.maui.storage, which is like the new namespace for whatever before it was in Essentials. And you can see that whenever we do show file picker, we have it on pick file, we could just say file picker, and we're going to pick a file, right? So that's what's actually happening now. And then I can select a file. I have a Harry Potter set or a Lord of the Rings set. Well, let's just take the Harry Potter one. It's going to say like, hey, there are 17 sets here. Let's analyze, and it's going to do a little bit of magic, and it's going to say like, hey, boom, you have 10,000 pieces, and you're going to need 2 boxes to move that all from one place to the other. So this just works all C#, all Blazor, which is really cool. But for mobile, this is a valid approach, right? We have that file picker. You still don't really have access to the file system as on Windows. But if I now switch this over through this fancy run menu to the Windows machine, and I click deploy, like I didn't change anything. This is the exact same code base for .NET MAUI and .NET MAUI Blazor. I'm going to now run it on Windows. And that opens up a whole new world, because on Windows, you might have already seen it while I scroll over here, you have the file system watchers. You have much more control over the file system, right? So I could just use file system watchers to make lives on desktop users easier. And you can see I get, again, the exact same thing. So this looks the same pixel to pixel. Because we have Bootstrap and all the web things here, it's still responsive. So even though this is a real Windows application, I can still do this and we still get all the benefits from a responsive application. But I don't have a button to actually upload something here, because I can now just go here to my Solution Explorer, which is somewhere here. And then I can go to the solution, show that in the File Explorer. And I have the two CSVs here. Let's just do a little, let's just be adventurous here, take the two. I go to my Downloads folder and I paste it here. Whenever I go back to my application, then it doesn't work. Let's try that again. Delete, paste. Oh, come on. Okay, well, what you should have seen here is that it now populates automatically, because we have these file system watchers, and we can just watch directly on the Windows file system that actually these files have changed, and whenever they are deleted, that will work as well. So, you know, we have this direct control over the file system. And like I said, like the other fun example is that you can actually, you know, format the whole C drive, and you can do everything that a native application can do, because this is the application, but we just have, you know, we just have this other little web sauce over it that you can do here. This works exactly the same. And this little like summary thing that we have here, that's like our shared thing, right? So that's something completely the same. And we have these two sets. Now let's see if it works the other way around. If I delete them, does it pick up on that? Just to prove that it actually works. Yes, that works. Woo! So you see, this is how we can work with this through this, but this is still the same project, right? So what if we do this through the web? Does it then still work? So I have another kind of thing here, which is the BrickSite server. So this is a WebAssembly server page. So if I set that as the starter project and I go run that, then, you know, we can see the exact same thing, but now it's running on the browser, running through that browser sandbox and all the things that I've been talking about over and over again here. And suddenly we, you know, we have to use this choose files, the file upload thing here, but all the functionality works exactly the same. And again, we have our shared component here, and that just works out of the box. We don't need to do anything special for that. So that's what makes this really powerful. But to make it even more cool, like I already mentioned, we are back to, you know, what is it, 1990s, we have a WinForms application. You can use WinForms again with .NET 6. Now, I'll be honest, this is not hooked up, but this is, you know, this is blast from the press, right? It has a designer and super fast. So we have this designer for WinForms, which is really nice. We have our combo box, or whatever, what was this called? This is a Dropbox, drop down. I don't know, but you have this fancy designer, you can do all the things. But this is kind of like the reality, right? We have these fancy sessions with these hip guys called Mark and Gerald with their funny shirts on. But tomorrow after the session, you're going to go back to your office and you're going to have to work on that legacy application, VB, WinForms, all the stuffs. And you're like, yeah, .NET 6 is far, far away from me. But this is like really powerful stuff, because the Blazor web view is also implemented for WinForms, as I mentioned, and also for WPF. So what you can do is have, if you have this WinForms application, but you're also building a new web-based application in Blazor, but, you know, and you want to bring that modernization to your WinForms app to not have to rewrite that whole big old dinosaur in one go, but just replace little bits and pieces, you totally can. So if we run this thing in WinForms, again, this is so fast. I don't know why we didn't just stuck with WinForms, but we have this thing. It doesn't do absolutely nothing. This is not hooked up to anything that I just showed you. But what I did, I used Bing to Google for like free Blazor components, like third-party Blazor components that you can download. They didn't even know .NET MAUI Blazor existed or any of this stuff existed. They just were focusing on web Blazor stuff. They built components for that. I just downloaded those, put them inside of a Blazor web view, and here in this analysis tab, you can now suddenly see this little HTML clock, and you can see this Apple Fitness kind of rings. And this is Blazor that you're looking at. This is called Ratson. That's the component vendor, so go look them up. They have some amazing stuff. But I just took those controls, installed them on this WinForms application, and it just shows up. It just works. We don't need to do anything special for that. And that, I think, really makes this powerful to open up scenarios also for legacy applications, to modernize your app, these things. So I think this is really something amazing. Did I already tell you this is amazing? Somehow, I'm sorry for the not so great noises here. Suddenly I have a little bit of a runny nose. I'm getting nervous here from all the. Whew. All right, so if you want another cool example, I think Mark mentioned this one already. This is kind of like the showcase that we launched at .NET Conf in 2021. This is like a real life showcase application. And what this does is all the podcasts. But what is really cool, if you go look at the source for this, is that it has a native Blazor app. A native .NET MAUI application. So everything built with native controls. It has that exact same app with .NET MAUI Blazor. So they do the exact same thing. It almost looks identical, but now everything is implemented with Blazor. Still running on .NET MAUI. The website, I think you can go to, actually, I have some time. I have all night. Do you have all night? Let's just find here a little bit about the Dutch news. That's always nice. So if we find here .NET podcasts, they have the actual website running here. You can just go here. This is a Blazor website. So like this is like mocked, right? So the sign in doesn't really do anything. It just takes you boom to the application. But this is actually a Blazor website. And these are actually podcasts. So Mark mentioned that he has a podcast. Well, let's see if it's important enough to be here. No pointers. Ooh, I don't know. Oh my gosh, it's here. Well, isn't that convenient? And you can see like this has all the episodes right here. You can say subscribed. Yeah, I was already subscribed because that's how much of a fan I am. You can actually start listening here. I hope the audio is not hooked up and you are now getting loud noises. So let me maybe turn down the volume if that's the case. And you can actually start listening here. So you can see this starts running. But what is really, really cool, if and the whole application, the whole showcase also includes the server component. So you can deploy all the things here. You have to watch out because it doesn't take the feed here, or maybe I set it up wrong, because just the other month I got like a notice like, hey, your Azure subscription is disabled because you used up all your resources, because I was demoing this on my own instance. So yay, look out for that. But you can totally run all of this yourself. And what is really cool, if you have this set up on the website, on the hosting side, and you have the application run on your device as well, or you go to the same URL, maybe you can actually go to this URL. Should we get really adventurous? Let's do it. So if you go to, let me put this in the chat. If you go to this thing, I'm not sure if this is going to work. This is totally unscripted. I'm going off script. Go here. And what you can do, I'm listening now to no pointers, which you should totally do as well. And I can go to listen together. And I can say, hey, I want to create a new room. What's my name? Well, my name is Gerald. Oops. Where am I typing now? Gerald, I want to type here. Why can't I type here? What's going on? This is not the point where I thought my demo would fail here. What's going on? Oh, there we go. Quick before it goes away. So I had Gerald, open room, and now we can listen together. So what this does, it opens a Signal R connection to all of this, and we can listen together. So it kind of like synchronizes the time code that we're actually listening to, and you can also give some responses that will show up on everyone's screen in the form of emojis. So you can click an emoji, and we have flying hearts and thumbs and everything. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work. Now the web server is overloaded as well because of all my typing skills right here. But typically, you would be able to go here. I think it should work with this instance that they're hosting as well. You could go to the listen together, and the room will have a code. And you can actually go there, enter that code, and we can get into this synchronized listening session. So let me see if I can. Oh, no, I can't even create a room. I totally broke this thing. Maybe their Azure instances now through the spending limit as well. Maybe that's what happened. No, probably not. Okay, one last go. No, nothing. Okay, so this experiment failed. Nice. Well, anyway, this is even if you're not going to run it, like this is a completely cool architecture to look at. if you go to the GitHub thing and look at how all the parts are moving together, there's a very extensive explanation of how it all fits together and how you can actually deploy it for yourself. This is too bad. I thought this was going to work. We could have had a lot of fun. Anyway, it's a cool solution. Go have a look. And you're probably now like, yes, awesome. At least I am, because that's how I am all the time, basically. And you want to, yes, I want to get to do all the things, and you punch a hole in your monitor and you're going to do it. But wait. Before I let you explore on your own, there is a couple of things that I want you to know. So a thing that I get asked then a lot is like, okay, I've seen now Blazor, I've seen Blazor the hybrid, I've seen all the things, I've seen .NET MAUI. When or should I use .NET MAUI Blazor at all? When or should I use .NET MAUI at all? Or when should I use Blazor? And the answer kind of is yes. You should use it all, and it kind of like depends on like what your background is, what your requirements are, what you want to do, right? So why do you want to use one thing or the other? Maybe you're a web developer that's looking into getting into cross-platform development, and you want to do those native apps because you have all these web developer skills, but maybe your boss wants to have that app icon in the store, and you want to have access to that camera and do all kinds of fancy things. With this scenario, you totally can. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you're a cross-platform developer who loves to work with all the back-end stuff, so with all the cameras, with all the sensors, but you want to have those pixel perfect UIs, and you can totally do that with like Blazor. Maybe you have that existing Blazor application, or maybe you have that legacy application that you want to modernize piece by piece by including some Blazor in it, or maybe just because you can, and you want to sniff in some modern technology and be included in all what's hip and happening. So it all depends on, there's no like one technology better than the other. It all has its place in time. That's basically what I want to say here. Whatever fits your needs, whatever you enjoy working with, that's also very important. You should totally do that. And, just consider the pros and cons of each approach and work with whatever you want to do. Here's a couple of resources. I will probably, I don't know if this will be shared, at least for the recording. So maybe take out your camera if that's what you want to do, but you can totally bing up all these things as well. Just use your search engine. And if you can't find something, just hit me up and I will provide you with the right links, or maybe a video on my YouTube channel, because you didn't forget to subscribe, right? You totally should. Thank you so much for joining. This was basically what I had to tell you for this evening. I hope it was somewhat useful to you. Again, find me on Twitter, email if you have any questions, ask your questions now, do whatever, or forever hold your peace. Thank you so much.